I don't think you can ever find a statement that Charlie and I have ever made in terms of Berkshire's companies or anybody else's where we said that there should be more people working than are needed in a company. And the 3G people have been successful in building marvelous businesses, and it is true that they have entered into some purchases where there were considerably more people running the business than needed. And the interesting thing is that after they reduced the headcount to the number needed, the companies have done extremely well. I mean, you've seen Burger King outgrow its main competitor by a significant margin. You've seen Tim Horton have some very good figures in the first quarter, and I don't know of any company that has a policy that says we're going to have a lot more people than we need. But a good many companies end up in that position, and if 3G buys into one, they quite promptly and treat people well in terms of the severance, but they get it down to what they need. And I hope our Berkshire companies are not being run with more people than they need either. They usually aren't when we buy them, and we look for those kind of companies that are well managed. 3G will, if they find out that 100 people are doing what 50 people can do, they'll get it to where 50 people are doing it. And I think that actually makes sense throughout American business. Charlie?
Well, the alternate to the system of having your company right-sized, the right number of people, is what eventually happened in Russia. And there everybody had a job. And the way it all worked out was some workers said, well, they pretend to pay us and we pretend to work. And the whole damn economy didn't work. Of course we want the right number of people in the jobs.
It's interesting in the railroad business. After World War II, in 1947 or thereabouts, I think there were about 1.6 million people in the railroad business, and it was a lousy business. And capital was short for any kind of improvements. And now there are less than 200,000. So they've gone from 1.6 million to less than 200,000, carrying more distance and doing it in far safer conditions. Safety has improved dramatically in the railroad industry. And if somebody thinks it would be better to be running the railroads with 1.6 million, people doing it, you would have a terrible railroad system. You wouldn't have anything like you have today. Efficiency is required over time in capitalism, and I really tip my hat to what the 3G people have done.
How about the dollar as a reserve currency? Do you have any issues or concerns in the next 50 again? I know we're in a good position now, but with us losing that position.
I think the dollar will be the world's reserve currency 50 years from now, and I think the probabilities of that are very high. Nothing certain, but I would bet a lot of money on that one. Charlie?
Well, I have a little feeling on that subject. I'm probably more nervous than a lot of people about printing a lot of money and spending it. There are times when you have to do it, I'm sure, and we just came through one. But I'm happier when we print money and use it improving infrastructure than I am when we just spread it around with a helicopter.
So what do you think is going to happen if we keep spreading it around with a helicopter?
I think it's always more dangerous than the economic profession thinks.
Warren, you have said that global warming has not increased Berkshire's payouts for weather-related events. Yet other insurers, including Travelers, have cited climate change as a risk factor that they use. Are Berkshire's models different? And if so, how?
Yeah. I've seen of course, the SEC requires you to put in all these risk factors, and the lawyers will tell you to put in, everything possibly you can think of, that you'll develop Alzheimer's or whatever it may be. I mean, they just want you to have a laundry list so that it's all been covered in case of later litigation or something of the sort. So people do put in weather risk, and maybe they put it in because they've got some model that shows it, but we price our business basically we price it every year. It's not like a life insurance company. A life insurance company, you make a contract at so much 1,000, and if you buy whole life insurance, that you've set a price for, if you're 20, you may have set a price for 60 or 70 years in the future. But that is not the property casualty insurance business which we're in. We set it 1 year at a time, and I see nothing that tells me that on a yearly basis that global warming is something that should cause me to change my prices a lot, or even a small amount. That doesn't mean that it isn't a threat to humanity, or and terribly important. It just means that if I'm going to sell a 1-year insurance policy, and I'm going to sell it on a $1 billion plant, I may care enormously about the fire protection and various other kinds of protection within that plant. I may care about what's going on adjacent to that plant and all kinds of things. But I am not thinking about global warming. It does not change the situation in a material way in any 1-year period of time, in my judgment. And if I was writing a 50-year windstorm policy in Florida, I would think very hard about what global warming might do in that case to the incidence and the intensity of potential hurricanes. But I do not think it has any material effect on the likelihood of, or the intensity of a hurricane in Florida or Louisiana or Texas or next year. So it is not it's not something I would put in the 10K as a threat. Charlie?
Yeah, I don't think it's totally clear what the effects of global warming will be on extremes of weather. I think there's a lot of guesswork in that field, and a lot of people like howling about calamities that are by no means sure.
Yeah, do you think, would it change your 1-year prediction as to what the rate should be?
No.
No, it wouldn't change mine either. So I don't really understand why they put that in there.
A lot of people get very invested in it. It's like a crazy ideology. It's not that global warming isn't happening. It's just that you can get so excited about it, you make all kinds of crazy extrapolations that aren't necessarily correct.
Yeah, look at it this way, Andrew. Would you change the rate for tomorrow on insurance because from the rate today for global warming? I doubt it very much. Now, would you change it for 50 years? Might very well. But I think that 1 year is much closer to 1 day than it is to 50 years in terms of focusing on that factor. So I do not want our underwriters to sit there thinking a lot about, in terms of writing a risk or the price at which to write that risk. I do not want them thinking about global warming. I want them thinking about whether there's a moral risk involved and who owns the property. I mean, that can be very significant. There used to be one fellow called Marvin the Torch, that if you insured Marvin the Torch, global warming didn't really make much difference. His building was going to go. But Marvin had a marvelous way of looking at it, though. He said, I don't burn buildings, I create vacant lots.
After the financial crisis, you said that young adults who were postponing household formation by living with parents or in-laws would eventually get sick of that arrangement, and that we would start to see normal rates of household formation once the job market improved, or even if it didn't. Jobs are now more plentiful, yet household formation still continues to be below rates thought to be normal, whether because of high student debt, a shift in attitudes about home ownership, or stricter mortgage terms for first-time buyers. Could something more secular be going on where household formation rates relative to the population could continue to be lower than historical rates? Could the U.S. become more like Europe, where many adult children live with their parents or in-laws for quite some time? Or do you think still that the subdued rate of household formation is mostly a cyclical phenomenon, and that the rate will eventually revert to the historical mean, boosting single-family home starts and earnings for this group of companies?
Yeah, I don't know the answer, obviously, but I think the latter is more likely. And I may be wrong. When's the last set of figures you've looked at in that connection? I've heard that it's turned up a fair amount in the last 6 months, but have you seen anything on that, Johnny? Or?
Nothing really recently, no.
Yeah, I should know the figures, but I don't for the last 6 months or 9 months. But my impression is that they had turned up somewhat. I did my best on selling that ring in the movie to that guy, and they're going to form a household here in another month or two, to which I've been invited. But the truth is, I don't know. What's going to happen on household formation. I would expect, but I expected it earlier than this. I would expect it to turn up. It always turns down in a recession, and you can argue that we're not all the way back from the recession yet. But your guess would be as good as mine, Charlie.
I feel exactly the same way, but I think I speak for a lot of members of the audience when I say I have some grandchildren that I wish would marry somebody suitable promptly.
What's the reason for your interest, Charlie?
I don't think it's healthy for these people to hang around looking for pie in the sky or whatever the hell they're doing.
Are they in attendance today?
I don't know some of them maybe. I don't want to name names.
No. I think you've already been pointed enough. Okay. Station 5.